Right, so what is the content that I'm covering from chapter C to F? You can see in chapter C, they speak about the acting allowances. In chapter D, there they speak about positions that you can apply for in terms of the public examination duties. And then we get to chapter E, sorry, and there that chapter focuses on awards and service benefits of all for all educators. And then of course we get to chapter F, which speaks specifically to time off and secondments, and those really just have a bearing on trade union reps. Okay, so let's do the acting allowance. So obviously we're speaking about if you're acting in a post and you are going to qualify for an allowance, then it means you're acting in a post higher than the post that you currently fill, right? That you're appointed in. So if you're post level 1 teacher and you're acting in a post level 2 or post level 3 or post level 4, then you may qualify for an acting allowance. The first point I highlight there from the PAM, it says your appointment must be in writing. And then this is important, I think, that the minimum acting period should be 12 weeks in order for you to qualify for that acting allowance, right? Now, most of our terms, the school terms, are anything between 10 and 12 weeks. So if you act for a term, you may be short of a few weeks in order to qualify for that acting allowance. So just follow up on that at your school, especially if you are not going to get the acting allowance because the period falls under 12 weeks. I am not sure how provinces stick to this provision that is in the PAM, but I'm saying if you are acting in a higher post, that you do in fact check that the acting is at least 12 weeks so that you can qualify for that acting allowance. Okay, what will you get in terms of the allowance? You can read the PAM, gives a lot of detail, but effectively you get an allowance that is based on the difference between your salary and the base salary of the higher post in which you are acting. Okay, so they'll take the difference. There's quite a mathematical process there where they'll take your salary and the starting salary of the higher post, and the difference in percentage they will calculate, and then eventually will give you 6% of that difference. Okay, so you can double check in the PAM for more detail, but effectively you should at least get 6% as an acting allowance. And then I want to jump to this point where, which posts will make you qualify for the acting allowance. So one is that there's a substantive vacant post. Let's say the departmental head is vacant, there's no permanent educator employed in that post, and so you may be appointed in that post, right? And I think I did explain that when we speak about the substantive vacant post, we're talking about a post that exists on your staff establishment. In other words, that post has been allocated to your school, and we call such a post a substantive post. If we say it's a substantive vacant post, then we are saying that there is no permanent educator that occupies that post. So you can act in such a post, and then if you act for a minimum period of 12 weeks, you can qualify for that allowance, right? You can also act in a post that, a higher post that has been temporarily vacated by the permanent educator, right? Now let's say the HOD, the departmental head, the DH, who is in that post level 2, maybe on sick leave or maternity leave or study leave, and so you may act in that post under these provisions and still qualify for the acting allowance. Okay, you may also act in a higher post if it is currently occupied by a permanent educator, but that educator has been seconded to another part or sector of the education department, or that educator has been suspended. Right, so those are the available vacancies that can arise, and then you can act in that post if you qualify, and of course you will then receive that acting allowance. That is what we find in chapter C, right? And then of course there are other allowances. You could, if you qualify, be paid as a tutor in addition to your salary, and this usually applies to tutors who are employed by the education department to tutor our grade 12s, and they usually form part of that extra curricular program that is run by the education department. You also have that second chance program that is run by the education department, so the education department will employ current educators who are qualified to teach that a particular subject, and then that tutor will get paid. Okay, then the next point that the PAM speaks about is that you can also get paid if you are doing additional overtime duties. Now, the PAM makes it clear that this is not the norm, and it's something that is going to be phased out. So there's not much clarity on what additional overtime duties are, but I'm sure if you speak to your unions or you speak to your principal, then you can find out if what that really means and see if you qualify, right? Then, of course, we move on to the public exam positions. If you do qualify to set one of the exam papers, let's say you are a high school educator and you apply to be one of the examiners. In other words, you set the paper, the various papers, because remember, for every grade 12 examination, there are quite a few papers that are set, and so there are a whole committee of examiners really that will set papers for a particular subject. So those are positions you can apply for. You can apply to be a moderator. If you want to apply to be an administrator, like for example a scribe or an invigilator, those are public exam positions that will become available during the national examinations. And in our case, we just have the NSC, the grade 12 examination, and sometimes we have a national assessment. Like in the past, we had the ANA, right? We currently do have here in the Western Cape the systemic assessments, but I think those are usually, retired educators and other people who are appointed as markers over there. But it's good to know that those opportunities are available. Of course, you can also be appointed as an exam monitor. If you're a permanent educator, the PAM allows for that. You can be a marker. So the markers will usually be associated with our grade 12 examination. And like I said, if there is a systemic assessment or a national assessment examination, you may be appointed by the education department, your provincial education department, or the national education department, and then you can get paid for doing those duties. Okay. I was very fortunate that I had experience in quite a few of these portfolios, either as a district official or when I was still at school, I was one of the markers of the grade 12 exam, and that was exciting, and we definitely got paid for all that hard work, right? So let's move on to post incentives. This area is covered. How can you be incentivized as an educator? Now, this speaks specifically to educators who teach in remote schools, right? There where they can't find teachers, and there where teachers don't really want to teach, because most teachers would like to teach in urban areas or suburban areas or semi-urban areas. People are not really keen to go into deep rural or rural areas. So there are post incentives, especially if the subject that you offer is scarce, and then the school could apply for that post to be incentivized In other words, the educator will get the regular salary and then also get additional remuneration because of that particular post has been incentivized, right? So the first category, the PAM is very clear on the categories that apply here. So the first category that can apply for post to be incentivized, in other words, the post will be, there will be additional remuneration attached to that post. The very first category is the remote schools category, right? And again, there are priority criteria that apply. So it's not just because you're in a rural area, you can apply for this post, right? They will look at the remoteness of the school. In other words, how remote is the school? How, is it in deep, deep rural? They will look at the committee, whoever's in charge of this, will look at the poverty status of the school. No fee schools will apply, but can you see how the order of merit, in a sense, of those criteria become sort of, the higher. The first criteria is very important, and of course the second criteria is poverty. The third criteria would be that you are no fee school as well, and then they will look at combinations of other factors that could motivate why you qualify for that particular post to be incentivized. I think this is important information, especially for schools in remote areas, in deep, deep rural areas, to have a look at this, because people may not be aware of this, right? Then, of course, there's another category. The second category covers other schools, and here the criteria speaks to posts that you find in, that you have in at schools that are in very difficult socio-economic areas, right? So they use the term difficult urban zones, like your probably your high poverty, gang infested, just a negative environment over there. So that could also be one of the motivating factors if you want to apply for a post to be incentivized. So let's say you're offering physics at your school, and you want to offer physics at your school as a high school, but you cannot attract educators to your school because your school is so city, it's located in a dangerous socioeconomic area. The children are poor. It's very, very difficult to teach at the school. Then you may apply to have that particular post incentivized so that you can attract people to come and teach at your school. Okay, and this applies especially, like I said, to scarce skills educators that offer physical science, maths, any subject where the school really struggles to find educators because of the complex social environment that the school finds itself in. Then, of course, the principal and the SGB can give a motivation, right? So the PAM does make provision for posts to be incentivized, but they do have, in summary, the two categories. The one that is for the remote schools that are is probably in the rural areas and deep rural areas, and then of course the second category just lumps all the other schools together, and you have to prove that you need to have a particular post incentivized, and that post is one of the key subjects, the gateway subjects. Okay, so that covers the area under chapter C and D, and now I want to move on to the service benefits. What benefits do you qualify for? And I think most educators know what benefits they qualify for, because you are public servants, right? You work for the public service, so there are certain service benefits that apply to all public service employees. And I just made a list of the ones that you obviously know about, like you do qualify for the housing allowance if you are under salary level 10. You do qualify for that housing allowance. And so I think I did make a video on the government employees housing scheme that you can go to and see exactly what you're supposed to do. You do qualify for medical aid, and we do know that the lowest level for the government's medical aid the, I think it's the ruby level. Those who earn a certain salary and you fall under the ruby level, you in fact you make no contribution towards the medical aid. And it's amazing how many of our state employees do not know that when they belong to gyms and they earn a certain salary, they could get 100% subsidy in terms of their medical aid. That's something that people need to explore. Then, of course, we know about the pension fund. I think most educators know about the service bonus that you do get during your month when it's your birthday. And then, of course, there is the long service recognition. So every 10 years, the education department will acknowledge your service, and you'll either get a certificate, but there will also be financial recognition. You do qualify for injury on duty, so you can be compensated if you are injured on duty. And of course, if you need to resettle, let's say you are going to take up a post in some far area, remote area, then there is that resettlement provision that you can qualify for as well. Okay. Then time off and secondments. Like I said, this section in the PAM speaks specifically to trade union representatives that you have at the school. So those trade unionists can get time off. They are legally entitled to get time off so long as they do not compromise the learning and teaching at the school. They don't disrupt the teaching program. So they are allocated time off because they do have trade union duties. Like they have to attend meetings, they have to represent the clients at discipline meetings, dismissal meetings, or whatever. Okay, and then of course training union reps can also be seconded to the trade union, and we're speaking about the trade unions that belong to the ELRC, right? So it's not just any trade union, it's all the trade unions that are aligned or linked up with the ELRC, registered with the ELRC. Then, of course, educators who are shop stewards can also be seconded, right?